This is the Experience Pros Radio Show. Got an opinion or want to ask us a question? Email radio@experiencepros.com or message us on the Experience Pros Facebook page, and we'll interact with you live on the show.
Hello, friends, and welcome back to the Experience Pros Radio Show. Very nice to have you along with us. Angel Tusty down in Las Vegas. That means our good friend and ColoradoCounselor.org, Robert Johnson. Sorry, I've got two things going here. Robert Johnson hanging out with us. How are you?
I'm great. Fantastic. Thanks for having me.
Thank you. Our next guest, whose name is Richard, is going to help us answer the question, how do ordinary people handle extraordinary grief? Everybody faces grief, despair, and tragedy at some point in life. And every day, ordinary people rise above such agonizing situations to continue their lives as best they can, despite their anguish. Richard Ballo is the author of Bullets and Babies, a true story of love, violence, and the spirit to live. He's an award-winning writer and national speaker on grief and healing, and he's appeared at various venues from hospices to bookstores. Been a guest on hundreds of radio talk shows. Now he's a guest on the Experience Pros radio show. Richard Ballo, welcome to the Experience Pros.
Thank you, Eric.
Very nice to have you along with us. Richard, I left out the details here. So start with, why did you write this book? What motivated the writing of this book?
What motivated me to write this book was just the strength of Janice Riddle and all the physical and emotional obstacles that she went through, and yet she seemed to rise above it and keep on living her life.
Okay, so for the people who don't know that name, please describe who is Janice Riddle and how.
An ordinary woman at age, being a mother and a wife, and was a cashier at a grocery store. A very ordinary person, but yet she seemed to pick men who drank too much, used drugs, and were physically abusive. But yet she overcame all these obstacles. And I think it's a very inspiring story for readers to see that somebody just ordinary, not a celebrity, can overcome this.
Absolutely. And you yourself have had a destiny date, if you will, with grief. Share your side of the story.
Well, my wife developed cancer when she was only 35 years old, and I was just 36 at the time, and given a prognosis of 6 months. Well, through a lot of therapies, chemotherapy, then non-traditional medicine, she lived almost 3 years, died at age 38, and I was plunged into widowhood at age 39 with 2 young sons to raise. So my experience helped me identify with Janice about the different aspects of life and what we had to go through to redefine who we were, get back on our feet, and do what's best for our children, and continue living to show our children and our friends and family that we can overcome these obstacles.
So, Richard, this is Robert. How are you?
Good, Robert. Thank you.
Good. So when you were left as a single parent after your wife died, how does that specific situation affect the way you dealt with and expressed your grief during that time?
Well, I really didn't know what grief was at that time. So as a writer, I went back into what was basic for me, which was writing. So I wrote down my experiences, and that became my first book, Life Without Lisa. So that helped, and also going through the process with grief counseling at hospice, they helped, and then other organizations to help know that what I was experiencing, feeling, even thinking, that I wasn't going crazy, but it was just normal grief, what people usually go through.
It's disturbing to hear the phrase "normal grief," not because it puts me out of my comfort zone, but because grief is normal, right? I mean, it's one of those things that we got a counselor here to my right, and I've got Richard Ballo here on the phone dealing with this. Now, Janice Riddle, the subject of your book, Bullets and Babies, she faced a different type of tragedy. Her husband accidentally shot her, and she became paralyzed, right?
That's correct.
So talk to us a little bit about what struck you most about the way that she is dealing with the challenges that she continues to face?
The way she dealt with it and the way she portrayed it to me, she accepted where she was. She accepted that her husband shot her, accepted that it was an accident, and said, okay, now what do I do? And yet her husband couldn't live with the thought that he had shot and paralyzed his wife. So he started drinking, and then he abandoned her. So now she had to cope with a different body, a different attitude towards the world and the world towards her, and accept what was she going to do? She still had 4 kids to raise from the age of 8 to 15. There wasn't very many things for her to do at that point.
And I'm assuming that your book, Bullets and Babies, The True Story of Love, Violence, and the Spirit to Live, is the account of the decisions that she made post that decision, that episode where her husband left. Is that correct?
That is correct. It starts off the night she was shot and goes through her decisions about how she wanted to take her own life, but didn't, and how she was determined to raise her children because children were everything to her.
Yeah. It's, I think everybody, like you said, as we started with the top of the segment, everyone deals with grief. And of course, not everyone gets shot or has, the death experience that you experienced with your wife at such a young age. But every one of us is going to deal with this. The book, Bullets and Babies, True Story of Love, Violence, and Spirit to Live. Where can we get a copy of that, and where can our listeners reach out to you if they are identifying with this topic here?
They can go to my website, richardballo.com. They can find the book from the publisher, Tolman Main Press, or on Amazon.
All right. Amazon or Tolman Main Press, richardballo.com, BALLO.com. And a final thought that you want to leave us with, a word of inspiration or something, Richard?
I think what I'd like to tell you listeners and have them walk away with is that even though all of us have our own tragedies, either 1, 2, or 3 different tragedies, we can still get up and walk away from it, learn from it, and carry on with life. We don't have to be stuck and let that incident define us.
Good point.
Solid words right there. Richard Ballo, thank you so much for joining us. We appreciate you for being on the Experience Pros radio show.
Thank you, Eric. I appreciate it.
Absolutely. And he brings up a great point, don't let the circumstances of whatever you're going through define you.
Right. And, I thought about those hospice workers that were dealing with my mother this last June, and they were fantastic people.
Yeah. As are so many, right? Caring people who jump into that field. Okay, don't go anywhere. We will return right after these messages. We're going to interview our very own Robert Johnson. It's coming next on the Experience Pros Radio Network.